Good evening. Thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Andrew Wicks, and I serve on the board of directors for Silver Lake Conference Center. It was my incredible privilege to serve at Silver Lake on staff for 6 of the first 7 years that Tim and Anne were co-directors, and I've been back to dean every year since I left. So it's been a fun ride.
And my name is Sam. I was on staff for about, I think, 6 summers. And I was a dean one time, and so I've been there for most of Tim and Anne's reign. Not all of it, most, if you want to call it a reign, really. And Chrissy, I just want to say that you just talked us up way too much because we're really not that funny.
You have your hat with you? You have your hat with you?
No.
How about that hat? Well, Sam and I were talking earlier about Fancy Camp and what exactly is the appropriate dress code for Fancy Camp. Because some of us have gone fancy and some of us have gone pretty campy. And right now Sam and I are a little bit kind of stiff with the jackets, but I thought maybe in honor of Anne, we could bust out a little. And the jackets are a little stiff. Now, if you've ever had the pleasure of spending some time at Silver Lake with Anne, you know that she has quite an incredible fashion sense. And I wanted to honor that tonight as well.
You look beautiful.
Why, thank you. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for being here this evening. We really are incredibly honored to be up here speaking to you and to see so many faces that support Silver Lake and the mission and ministry of our outdoor conference center here in Connecticut.
How do you wear these things?
So, Sam and I were asked a few weeks ago by Anne if we'd be willing to be here tonight, and we got together and had breakfast and started talking about what was it like to be on staff for all those years and the stories that we remember from working with Anne. And a lot of laughs during that session, a lot of good memories.
Absolutely.
We wanted to present to you tonight a few anecdotes.
That was for Tim, but...
So, as you may know, Silver Lake is a place of extravagant welcome, and one of the best parts of going to Silver Lake is, as soon as you walk in the front door to the Health and Welcome Center, that Tim is there with a hug and wants to catch up about what's going on with your life, and Anne is right behind him, ready to hug and say, hey, tell you about all the things that are happening at Silver Lake. Although I should say, Silver Lake is in Sharon, and they're excited to see anything that's not a dog or a Yeti out there, so...
Yeah. No, I just kind of reminisced about the first time I ever met Anne in like a professional manner. I think it was in my interview for Family back in 2006. And I just kind of remember, Tim being this like bright, fun, and easygoing guy, and Anne like asking the questions and just looking at me looking down at me.
My first meeting with Anne Hughes was also my staff interview in 2004 for Camp Family. And back in those days, all of the administration for Silver Lake was run out of what is now the Cedars Staff Housing. It was a tiny little office. It was a tiny fraction of the size that we have here. And in that room they had Tim and Anne's office, Stephanie was there, Josh was there. In addition to that, they had a deep passion for animals. So inside the room also lived an enormous plastic tub full of ducks. And could anything be more Silver Lake than a plastic tub full of ducks that lives inside the office? Over the time that I've spent there, we've had a series of ducks, we had guinea hens, we've had goats, we've had pigs. Tim and Anne have rabbits that they keep at their house. They're great lovers of nature. And one of my favorite stories about Anne is probably about 2007, 2008, there was a baby duckling that was found abandoned down by the waterfront, and Anne nursed it and kept it in the pocket of her hoodie, and carried it around with her everywhere she went for the whole week. Yeah, until it died. That's.
And that brings us to Anne being blunt. Something I remember about Anne is, You know, if you've ever been on staff before, you know we have a great band and a great choir, as I would call it. You know, every year we practice the staff show. You know, and even if Anne wasn't leading the music, she would stand off to the side, and she'd definitely have a microphone. I don't know if you've ever met Anne before, but I think she carries one around in her purse. And you could just hear her be like, "I want to hear those harmonies. Let me hear them." Just screaming in the background, even if she wasn't leading the music. Come forward to the stage.
So between Sam and I, we have about 15 years of summer camp staff experience. And there are some things that you learn in that time. And really, can I see hands? Who here has worked on Silver Lake summer staff before? Hey,
all right.
Look at them. Well, if you have ever been on the Silver Lake staff, and even if you've deaned or been there, you may have picked up on some of these things, but there are 3 essential truths that I've learned in my time. The first is that if you ever get assigned to lead a night hike, that is a punishment worse than death. It is. The second one is that if you have ever served on Camp Family, you know that you worked at least 30 times as hard as the kids on Camp Family work today. It just gets easier every year. And the last one is that if you mess up something really, really big, you pray to God that Tim is the one that disciplines you. Tim Hughes is the face of stern warnings. And Anne Hughes is the face of pack your bags, you're going home.
So I remember, like, I don't know, 07, 08, 09. I think it's an issue every year, but they're always honest about the staff being on time for breakfast. So, you know, by beginning of week 6, there's one day where everyone is finally on time, except for one person. And that would have to be Anne Hughes, who shows up every day, at least a minute late. If not, she misses breakfast altogether and walks in with a cup of coffee a little later than that. And it's ready to go. Always ready to go, but always late.
Being a co-director is not an easy thing, as I'm sure Tim and Anne can testify to. In addition to living at Silver Lake year-round, they work together, the two of them, along with the staff, especially during the summer. It's close quarters. You eat together. You share some living space. They have the additional responsibilities of enforcing some discipline and some rules and some safety stuff. And the staff can get rowdy, especially by about week 6. You're starting to feel a little stir crazy. A couple years ago, Tim and Ann pulled all the TVs out of the buildings, which was like a horrible, horrible experience. How dare we have a summer camp without TVs? And so staff would spend their evenings singing songs, bitching, thanks, Ann.
Blunt. A little bit blunt.
Usually making up inappropriate versions of the same camp songs that we know and love. And my personal favorite goes to the tune of "What Does the Lord Require of You?" The song is "What Do the Hughes Require of You?" And I cannot sing it in front of you. But if you buy me a beer later this evening, I'll sing you a verse.
They don't all make sense. I'm just going to throw it out there. Hey, can I see your
Those are my notes for the presentation this evening.
Oh, excuse me.
Well, if it's not yours, don't touch it.
Which brings us to our next anecdote. This one time during staff intros, we were going over the Silver Lake nose, and a child says, "If it's not yours, don't touch it." And Anne replied, "Correct, no sexual activity." Which makes total sense. It's perfect.
We've hinted before, but Anne can be very direct. And being a camp director takes a thick skin. It does. There are very serious issues you face at camp around safety. Tim and Anne have had to navigate the waters of running the facility, managing the staff, occasionally the unpleasantries of the work that are very serious in nature, and they've handled them expertly. But you also get your fair share of camp staff that just like to whine and complain, and Anne has a pretty low tolerance for that sort of thing. I guess this has never actually happened, but just to provide an example of what that might look like, if there was a staff person who was to complain about their neighbor was too loud in the evening or something of that nature, Anne has a kind of response where she'd grab a coffee mug and she'd unscrew the top, she'd go over and she'd fill it up at the tap, and then she'd come over to you and she'd put the cup in one hand and she'd put the lid in the other, and she'd look you dead in the eyes and say, "Shut the full cup." Tim would bust out his guitar and sing you a song. Do you have bike training? Bike training? Is that what you're...
Oh, yeah, okay. And, one of my favorite parts of the summer, during week 7, it used to be week 8, but it kind of switched to week 7. But, Tim would be, on his bike probably a couple times a week training. Because they'd always do a bike trip after the summer, through Europe or something. And then, week 7, Anne would show up all tired and stuff every day and be like, "Anne, what are you doing?" He goes, "I started training for the bike trip, week 7. Every time. Every summer.
Stuff breaks a lot at Silver Lake. Kids are pretty rough on the facilities, and they take a lot of maintenance. And there's a distinct difference between Tim and Anne when it comes to buying the replacement pieces for the truck, the tractor, or whatever else is going on. If you were to come up to Tim and tell him, "Tim, we have broken a piece on the truck," Tim immediately launches a full-scale investigation. Who was there? What happened? Is it broken? How much is it going to cost? And then, somewhere in this investigation process, Tim remembers that sometime back in the 1970s, he thinks he remembers there was a replacement piece for that truck. And so he will send you on a hunting party throughout camp in every dusty nook and cranny, trying to find a bicycle sprocket from 1972. So it's there somewhere. When you go to Anne and you say, "Anne, the 3 of us need to go take a ride into town. Can we have the credit card?" Anne says, "Yeah, make sure to sign out." But we have a lot of jokes because we've spent a lot of really good times together. But the truth is that over the course of Tim and Anne's last 11 years as co-directors of Silver Lake has experienced an incredible transformation. And I have been very lucky to have been there and witnessed much of what has happened. If you have spent time up there, you know that over the last 10, 11 years, you've seen an incredible capacity building over that time. And that covers a number of areas. There is a huge building of human capacity. They have put an incredible amount of time and energy and love and resourcing into the people that are there, their staff, their coordinators, and reaching out to affiliates within the conference. They also have made an intentional effort to outreach to a couple individual people and just say, "Hey, we thought you might need this encouragement or this push along the way." Sam and I were incredibly lucky a couple of years ago to get invited to go to Synod. Anne emailed one day to say, "Hey, we need your skill set. Can you help us out? I thought you would be good for this. This seems like a place where God could be calling you to do the work." And Sam and I both got to go work at the Outdoor Ministries Association facility at Synod in Long Beach a couple of years ago.
God called us to Southern California for a week.
Working for God ain't easy. But in addition to the human capital, we've seen a real development of the physical capital of Silver Lake. In the first few years that they were there, we saw a capital campaign, and the money from that capital campaign is still being spent. But you've seen the addition of a composting toilet, which is an incredibly good time if you ever get a chance to use it. the building of a health and welcome center, the expansion of the Cedars dining space, renovation of the retreat center, building of new cabins and commons buildings. In the coming year, I believe we're going to see some renovations to the lodge, some new roofs on the buildings, which date back about 45 years. It is not an exaggeration to say that there are a great number of church camps today that may have already had their last summer, and that is often due to deferred maintenance. The facilities just aren't kept because the money isn't there. And Tim and Anne, along with their partners in the conference, have found a way to keep Silver Lake alive and viable for the next generation of young people. Let me do one more thing.
See what I mean?
And then I know. And it's not just the people. It's not just the buildings. It's what we do there. It's the programs that matter. It's the programs that touch kids' lives and change their lives. And for some of them, maybe make them feel like they have a home and they can see God for the first time in their lives. Our programs over the last 10, 11 years have flourished with arts and music, a focus on inclusion and access for all people to Silver Lake Conference Center, a focus on not bullying. Everywhere that you look at Silver Lake, you can see the imprint and the shadow of Anne Hughes, except at breakfast.
Andy did a great job talking about all the great stuff that's happened at Silver Lake in the past 10 years now that you guys have been there. I've been there for 8 of them. Mine's a little bit more personal. I'd like to say that, I had a lot of my first leadership opportunities at camp, and Anne definitely helped me through. She was my director for the first few years, and she definitely helped me through a lot of that. I had a couple difficult people to deal with, and she was always there. But she didn't just give it to me. She definitely made me work pretty hard for it. She was always about kind of learning to do it by herself, and definitely that suck it up attitude came, shut the full cup. And, do your best and, let your true self shine through. And that's something that I really admire about Anne, is she really doesn't let the mainstream bug her at all. I mean, you can see in the outfits that she wears. I have a list. Floppy hats or harmonies, or, if she's, I'm going to drink this bottle of wine. That's just the way Anne is. So, trying to order Italian at an Italian restaurant and not doing so great at it. That's just the way she is. She lives life to the fullest. She's all about, trying new things, and she's one of the most excited people about things that I've ever met. Want
me to take it home?
Yeah, you can take it home.
Okay. So, when people ask me what Silver Lake is, what I have to tell them is that Silver Lake changed my life. But the reality is that when I say that, part of what that means is that Tim and Anne Hughes changed my life. They really did. And so from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you, Tim, and especially thank you, Anne, for your years of service, for everything that you have done for the conference, for Silver Lake Conference Center, for the youth of the Connecticut Conference, and all the other conferences that send kids here, for the state of Connecticut, and for God. Thank you. Thank you.